Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Let me put myself on video here so you can see me. The webinar is Educating and Coaching PFAC Members for Maximum Impact, and this is part of our Get a Black Belt in PFAC series, where we explore strategies to help hospitals strengthen their patient and family advisory councils and start new PFACs. The name is based on my black belt in karate and the title of two books that I've written, one of which is Get a Black Belt in Marketing, when I was in professional services marketing. So I'm Barbara Lewis. I've spent more than a decade researching PFACs, culminating in a national mixed method study on PFACs across U.S. hospitals. And my work focuses on helping health systems translate evidence into practical strategies that strengthen patient engagement, safety, and experience. My interest in PFACs began over 12 years ago when I spent 2 weeks in the ICU with my sister, who passed away very tragically. And since then, I've devoted myself and my consulting and my research to helping hospitals partner with patients and families to improve care delivery and outcomes. And I'll be sharing some of that research with you today. So please put your questions in the Q&A, not the chat, and the Q&A may be located under More in your Zoom menu. So one of the reasons why I wanted to have a webinar on this particular topic was that during my research, I discovered that 3 hospitals closed their PFACs because of disruptive members. And yet other leaders whom I spoke with were coaching the members who could have been disruptive about their behavior. And these are our panelists today. So let me introduce our panelists. Amber Washington is the Patient Advisory Coordinator at Tampa General Hospital. She oversees 15 PFACs in a hospital with over 1,000 beds. And Katie, if you're on camera, I don't see you, but hopefully go ahead and put yourself on camera. Katie Litter is a program manager of family partnerships at Boston Children's Hospital, which according to my research was the first hospital in the US to have a PFAC. And the purpose of that PFAC was actually to provide input for a new facility. And Boston Children's Hospital has 485 beds and over 20 PFACs. And Quinlan Davis is the Patient and Family Experience Manager at the University of Maryland Capital Regional Health. And he and I first met when he was at Michigan Medicine, which has over 30 PFACs and 814 beds. So if you're like me, you're probably wondering, how does a small department manage 15, 20, or 30 PFACs as our panelists do? And this is actually going to be a future webinar on how you increase the number of PFACs without stressing out your department. So Quinlan, you and I had a discussion about a toolkit actually that you use for departments, and that's something that will be in our next webinar. So before we get into educating and coaching PFAC members, let's talk first about the orientation and the onboarding that occurs with your PFACs and your PFAC members. So Amber, let's start with you. What do you do?
Thanks, Barbara. It's great to be here. Thank you for everyone for joining. So with our PFAC over at Tampa General, we have a virtual onboarding initially that our advisors go through. So when they first apply, we have a series of application steps that they have to go through. And then we have an onboarding chair. She's the member at large that takes the time to actually begin interviewing the individual and then sharing structured feedback through a scoring matrix and key questions that we provide for the team to ask the PFAC members. From there, it goes to our next executive committee member who would then interview that individual, and then to me as the final approval or denial, depending on the situation. And then we welcome them to the PFAC. So once that happens, they go through a series of background check and then they also undergo a PFAC-specific virtual onboarding training. And this training really is selective in giving examples and scenarios on how to best be an advisor within the organization. And it allows them to see in a nice animated way ways that we discourage giving feedback and ways that we encourage giving feedback. Once they complete that module, they also go through a volunteer essentials onboarding, which means it's a virtual training that allows them to get regulatory and compliance and HIPAA training and understand that they are within a health system. And then after that, they will attend an in-person onboarding training 1 hour before our general PFAC meeting in order to get everything else that they need to best succeed as an advisor. So we talk about tips and tricks to really make sure that they are successful when joining the TGH PFAC and really giving them a head start into being a great advisor.
Well, that must help you in terms of the future and people maybe having disruptive behavior if they're going through all this kind of training. I really like that part about discouraging feedback. Yeah, a certain type of feedback or discouraging the ways. What are some of those things that you talk about that you don't want people to adopt in terms of the feedback that they're giving in a meeting?
Yeah, great question. So one of them being, we really don't want them to dominate conversations when the team members are giving them feedback or asking for their feedback. We want them to be open to understanding what the team member is asking them, and then coming from a place of curiosity and asking those follow-up questions if they're not really sure. Another one is really not sharing those personal medical experiences. Those are important, but what I mean by that is not going drawn and long out as to, when I came into the hospital, this is what I went through, really coming from that general patient perspective and kind of impacting what impacts the whole patient, right? Let's talk about what can help everyone, not maybe just to your specific experience. And then just understanding like individual needs versus system level needs. So is this something that individually affects me, or is this something that affects the whole health system? And so those are some things that, that training actually helps identify for them to understand, what approach to take when giving that feedback.
Yes, that's very important in terms of the storytelling to limit the amount of time. And I just did a video last night on how to tell a story based on problem, solution, benefit, which is what I was taught by my Wall Street Journal editor when I was a reporter. And I changed it a little for patients. It has to do with the issue, the suggestion, and the outcome. And I give an example in 1 minute of something that happened to me that I felt could be improved. So that video will be available. I didn't want to show it during this meeting. So, Katie, let's move on to you. Talk about your onboarding and orientation that you do.
Sure. Well, I think Amber did an amazing job. We have a comprehensive process as well that both ensures that we know who may be stepping foot on our premises. We are a pediatric hospital. We like to be extra careful uh, as an advisor. But I think instead what I'll do is instead of repeating some of the steps that we do, I'll just talk a little bit about that very first interaction. And so even before we get to the formal application process, during that first touch point, we start with expectation setting, but we also start with like, I meet with everybody and I tell them who I am and why they're talking to me. And then I just say, I'd love to hear about you. And I love to hear about you, your family. We are a pediatric hospital. So typically I'm speaking with a caregiver who's sharing their story with a child. And like, if you could wave a magic wand and design your advisory experience, what would that look like? That tells me so much, because then I zip my lips and I take a bunch of notes, and it does allow me to guide them appropriately to the right advisory channel for them. So that is something that we do before we even get to that onboarding, when they receive that sort of structured guidance about the do's and don'ts. But one thing I find is that people tend to really have different understanding of what advisorship means. And so I do take that very first meeting to explain that in our hospital, that does not mean we're at the bedside. That does not mean we're mentoring other patients and families who are in the thick of their journey. We have people who are qualified to do that. Advisorship in our organization means working together collaboratively with our staff and leadership on bodies of work that have time, manpower, and budget allocated to them, because those are the areas where we have the opportunity for impact. That honestly gives an aha moment to a lot of people. And over the years, I've been doing this work for about a decade, but I do come to it through my personal journey. And so I've been an advisor for 17 years myself with my own children, being the patients, and then professionally for 10. And we have devised a few different, we'll talk about this stuff later, channels, because I don't like to say no. The PFAC may not be the right home for them, but especially when you're looking to volunteer your time, no is a hard pill to swallow. And so we try to provide some other channels that may give that person, any individual, the opportunity to feel seen, heard, and valued in a way that really also works for the organization.
That's great. So everybody who volunteers has a home somewhere for their voice to be heard. So Quinlan, anything different to add to this, or should we move on?
I actually there's a lot of similarities between the three. The one thing that may be a little different from us is the first initial interview are done with our previous advisors. So the advisors is the one that actually interviews, and then they're giving us the opinion on whether if they're gonna go forth or not. And the one thing that we ask like really behavioral questions to see if they had if they did had a bad experience at the hospital, to see if this is the right time for them to actually be an advisor with us, or do we have to take some time, or as we say, we like to take some time to heal from your past to be more productive when you go into the room. And I would say that we after all of our orientations, we set up a 30-minute elevator speech. So everyone outside of the menu will do their 30-minute elevator speech. So this is why they wanted to be an advisor. This is what they want to do. Got to keep it in 30 seconds and then go forward from that too.
30-second speech.
Yeah, 30 seconds.
So what percentage of the interviews are people turned away? Often or no?
So we don't turn, especially at Michigan, man, we didn't turn many people away. We just steered them into another direction.
I see.
So
the same as Katie's doing.
yeah, so like what Katie did, we may not have you in a meeting or things like that, but you may be a good fit for one of our pop-up meetings, going to being an e-advisor, or just doing some other programs that may be interested in.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to intersperse these questions with some studies. So these are the 3 studies that I did, a literature review, and you can find all of these in the Journal of Patient Experience. The last one, which was a quantitative study, is scheduled to be published momentarily. So these are the studies, and here is what the studies found in terms of the surveys. So the recruitment, as we're seeing, is very important at the front end before we get to coaching and educating the PFAC members. So the candidate interviews, discussion with the patient's doctor also is important. And in one conversation I had, the person said that they turned away somebody because when they consulted with the doctor, the clinician said that security had to be called the last time the patient was in the office. So find out about litigation. I have heard a story that somebody joined a PFAC because they wanted to know the inside workings about the hospital through the PFAC, and then a trial meeting. So this was a question. Do potential members attend a council meeting before being invited? And 72% said no. But in red here, best practices, I'm recommending that yes, you have a meeting, a trial meeting where the person is invited to that meeting. And what I found in one PFAC that I was starting was that somebody totally monopolized the conversation. And so they went to the introductory member meeting, but they were not invited back to be on the council. So is there a defined term of membership? Yes, this helps with getting people off the PFAC sometimes if that's necessary and they can't be coached. And while the majority of people say that the term of duration is 2 years, I recommend 1 year because then what you can do is you can have re-upping year after year. Okay, so let's stop there and go on to the next question, and that is, what kind of documents do you have that are going to define the meeting protocol? And let's start with Katie here.
Sure. So couple things. We have a formal steering committee that sets our formal meeting agendas, and we are very strict on the timekeeping. Timekeeping is like this unsung hero of meeting protocol, but people do understand, and we're really tight and right. We start on time, we end on time, and then we do proceed to get through all topics on our agenda at every meeting. That sort of is an unseen cue to keep things clear and concise and to use different modes of communication during the meeting in order for more voices to be heard. So we do have, and I'll talk about it in a little bit, but like I do send out calendar invites with meeting etiquette on there. We don't publish anything without first sharing what we're sharing and why we're sharing it. It's not pinpointed or targeted to any specific person, even though typically we are addressing a few people in the room, maybe more so than others, but it just helps to set a level playing field and manage expectations. We also welcome communication through multiple channels during and after meetings. And I do have an introductory slide that is shown at each meeting that highlights those. So that's raising your hand and speaking verbally. That's using the chat. That is using those reaction buttons at the bottom of your screen, as well as we host post-meeting office hours for those who are processors and just need time to marinate on the information, then they want to share later. And then inevitably after every meeting, I get 1 to 2 emails with written feedback from our thinkers.
Oh, I see. And that's what you would consider meeting etiquette, all those things that you just
Well,
named.
I would say so because it's a way to hear everybody in a way that is not disruptive to others. But I would say I'm going to let the other two speak because they're going to say exactly what I would say. We don't speak over one another, right? We don't speak over one another. We do have a dedicated person who's monitoring the chat and giving voice to what comes in the chat in an appropriate way. But just imagine we're all passing the talking stick around one person at a time.
Right. Quinlan, what about you? Any documents that you're using to define the meeting protocol?
So we use the Roberts Rule of Order. So just as Katie said, we want to make sure that everyone has a voice that wants to speak, and that's how we keep order and structure within our PFAC. And because we are in the DMV area, which is right next to DC, a lot of our advisors work for government organizations or work for the government, so everyone kind of already knows the order of how to use it. But we do provide a simplified how to structure the meeting, which everyone has a right to participate if they wish to do so. You can only speak a second time after those that are have spoken once or wish to speak have already spoken. You have to right to know wherever everything is going on. So if you don't understand, we will provide a more simplified way of doing things. and you cannot interrupt the speaker unless it is urgent. It got to be dire urgent in order to interrupt the speaker. And then only one thing is going to be discussed at a given time, in which two individuals will have to give a motion to move on in order before we move on to a different subject. So that way we getting voice to everyone. We making sure everyone gets heard. And when we move to the online version, then we give way to the chat version. If anyone, we have our introverts who are comfortable with speaking out loud, so we give way to put it in the chat as well.
See, so in one PFAC that I was on, it was around Robin, and the question would be asked, and the first person would raise their hand and then go around, and everybody would speak. And if you didn't have anything different to say from what another speaker had said, you would just say ditto, and it would move on. So everybody had an opportunity to speak. So I remember Robert's Rules of Order years ago when I was president of an organization. I used to use that. It was a little red book. So I'm assuming it's online now and it's something that can be purchased. Is that right, Quinlan?
Yep, we there is an online book. We have like a small 2-page documents for all the things that you need to know while you in the PFAC that we will give out to. Luckily, like I said, a lot of our advisors have governments or organizational background, so this is how they run their meetings usually. So for CAP region, that's how we do things here.
Thank you. So Amber, anything different from what's been said about documents that you have?
So we have a PFAC charter that outlines, how we run the meetings and the expectations. Every meeting that we have had a set agenda. So on that agenda, it will state line by line kind of what's to come or what's next. And our chair, our executive committee chair, he leads the meeting, and he's the one that goes step by step through that agenda, from the welcome to having new advisors, raise their hand, introduce themselves, to the meeting minute approval of the last meeting. And then we do have moments where we give kudos to advisors and team members on the call. And then we go in right into the agenda and the topic that we have ready to go for that particular meeting. So he'll go step by step. He'll give that guest speaker a moment to speak. And then afterwards, there's always opportunities for questions. The advisors, if we're on an online meeting or if we're in person, because we always have a virtual option, they have free reign to ask questions throughout in the chat. And I am normally the one monitoring the chat, along sometimes other advisors or colleagues. And we make sure to answer those questions or even bring light to those questions once the guest speaker or whoever is speaking is done, to allow them to get their questions answered if they don't want to readily come on and ask. So we definitely have a structured agenda, and we go, the meeting starts at 5 o'clock and ends at 6 or 6:30, depending on what the meeting is set to do. And we are pretty strict on our time stamps as well.
So all of this has really set the groundwork for running the meeting and probably preventing some issues with behavior. So let's move on here. And I wanted to share some research. How frequently do you provide training for your members? I mean, it should be always, but this was pretty shocking to me. Now, this is beyond orientation and onboarding. This is just training to be a PFAC member. And it's kind of surprising to me that we ask who wants to be a PFAC on the PFAC. People raise their hands and then we put them on. But you've just heard some great ideas about leading up to actually being invited to be on the PFAC. But then we get them on the PFAC and we just expect them to act a certain way or to participate a certain way. And we really need to help them with some kind of training. So this was rather surprising to me. So let's move on then. And the next question is, what education do you provide for PFAC members? And this is again beyond onboarding and orientation. And Katie, let's start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Barbara. So we, interestingly enough, we've done a lot of training over the years. I've received a lot of different training throughout my years as being a volunteer advisor and then as a staff member. We've tried a lot of different things, from effective storytelling to integrating into committees. Where we've really landed though now, and this is really post-pandemic, is focusing on inclusivity and belonging. And that's for a couple reasons. And it sounds odd, but it actually has some really positive trickle-down effects. So when the pandemic forced us to be 100% virtual, we found that using things like Zoom allowed us to reach voices that we had been lacking when we operated fully in person. But what we also realized is everybody is incredibly busy. And when you welcome the voices of those who really represent your patient and family populations, these are incredibly busy people who don't have a couple extra hours to come in for monthly training or who don't have extra time outside of committee meetings. And so what we did was we looked at our agendas and we said, how do we build this into our monthly agenda while still preserving the opportunity to give feedback and perspectives to work? Because that's why we join advisory groups, is to be seen and heard. And so for the past few years, we've worked together with some workforce leaders to provide some tailored training for our FAC members. They focus on bringing your authentic self to the table. They focus on respecting differences. They focus on acknowledgement that we are stronger because of our differences. And they've given us opportunities to get to know one another a little bit more deeply. And what's come out of that is just a cohesive group that looks around the table now and sees like, oh gosh, that person has major street cred in my book because I learned this about them. And they really handled that so well. I can't believe that ever happened to them. Or this person and I both love this activity. And so we have an affinity and we've built trust. And with that trust and respect, I'm more comfortable saying what I really mean and I really feel in that advisory group. And the way it trickles down, Barbara, is because as each of our advisors grow in their confidence and in a group where they feel comfortable, they actually bring that confidence with them to other projects and work groups where they are representing the voices of a broader group of patients and families in those settings. So,
that's fascinating.
Yeah, we found that this works and we just keep doing it. And we do one big dedicated meeting every July. And then we do a small bite in January, a small bite in April, and a small bite in October dedicated to that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Quarterly reinforcement. And then where does the training come from? Where did you get the July training that you're doing?
Yeah, so we have some workforce diversity leadership team members at Boston Children's. They're just frankly wonderful people who are also educators. And so we said, you've always been great partners to us. We want to build this workshop, and they work together with us to tailor something. And then each quarter we go to them and we say, we've been seeing this theme, or we've been hearing appreciation for this, or we'd like to see more of that. And they help us bring those components. And when I say bite size, I'm saying like a 25-minute, we have an hour and a half meeting. So it's like a 20 to 25-minute agenda item. And then we do other work.
Is any of that available for the public?
I could ask.
Okay.
I'm happy to ask.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I would. Sure. I think there's probably people on who would love to know more about that training.
Sure.
So Quinlan, what about you? How are you educating your PFAC members?
So all of our advisors and volunteers are known as basically unpaid employees. So they do go through some of the same trainings as us. And as us at the Office of Patient Experience, if we're giving a training, then the volunteers have to go through that as well. So right now, our big push is for trauma-informed care. So our advisors have to go through that same training. So when we get to our meetings, everyone is on the same page about what's going on with the organization as well.
I see. Okay. Good. And Katie, I'm sorry, Amber, how about you?
So our meeting structure, we have a general PFAC board meeting, and then we have a general PFAC guest speakers meeting. And we do it every other month. And so the guest speakers meeting is where we really highlight those education topics for our advisors, and we bring in key leaders that are subject matter experts around certain topics. And they talk highly to certain topics within the organization that are going on to keep our advisors abreast into the healthcare culture, the hospital organization, and then allowing them to ask questions to become more health literate and advocate for themselves when they come into the health system.
Oh, I see. Okay. Now let's switch this up and now talk about how we are educating people like you who are working with PFACs and employed by the hospital. So I heard a story of someone volunteering to be on a committee, and they said, okay, it's in this room at this time on this day, and they showed up, and the rest of the committee, the hospital employees, had no idea why the person was there. So obviously no training and didn't even inform them. But what type of training is being done by the hospital for the hospital liaisons and the leaders of the PFAC? Katie?
So we do not host formal trainings, but we do invest the time on a couple different levels. So here's an example. We went recently to, about 2 years ago now, not really recently, to our patient care safety and quality team. And I did a group presentation really about we're all going to partner with our families, right? Because we're going to get to more optimal outcomes through that partnership. And we showcased a little bit about who our advisors are, where they're working, some of the highlights, and what's in it for them, right? And so that was really the spotlight of it's worth your time, energy, and effort to partner with a family because it actually does something for you in your professional career and your outcomes and your credibility. Then once we went to the group setting, I scheduled meetings with each of these groups, and these were safety groups. And there can be a lot of hesitancy, especially in the safety world, about pulling back that shower curtain and letting us peek behind, like nobody is perfect. But what I realized when I did this was it gave them just a casual setting to ask questions, to tell me about their group, because each individual is different. All the teams are different. They have different goals, priorities, timelines. And when I listened to them, I think they appreciated that. And they knew I was going to be thoughtful about who I would place with them. But we have a resource, but I was able to verbally communicate that in like a friendly, casual manner. And it was way more well received than just me emailing this 3-page resource about like, you will do it this way. But it's little things. Like if you see my name right here, I say Katie Litterer, Boston Children's. It's like, hey, when you have a family advisor join, ask them to put Katie Litterer, family advisor, so that people aren't startled to find out that there's actually a family member on the call. Tell your team ahead of time that this is going to happen and that this is a welcome voice and an equally valued team member at the table. Do an introductory call with that family advisor. Tell them a little bit about your group and what your goals are. Set expectations. Ask them what they prefer. Maybe this is someone who, like me, will just be like, excuse me, I don't get what you're saying. But they might be somebody more thoughtful who would appreciate if you pause and say, Katie, do you have anything you'd like to add? Do you have any questions? And then always a follow-up. So we do have a resource. I send it along, but I precede that with a conversation with them to try to build some connection.
Yeah, great advice. Amber, how about you? Do you provide any education for hospital employees regarding working with PFACs?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, I last year I launched a Lunch and Learn series. We were trying to grow our PFAC and to really enhance the more counsels and availability for the advisors to be able to be a part of various service lines. And so I engaged those leaders initially by having a leadership touch point where I just simply said, here are the expectations as a leader that we would want you to do to support our patients and why it's best practice. And then I did an actual the lunch and learn component where we invited a lot of their team from their department. And naturally, when you feed people, they want to show up and they want to, hear what you're talking about. So provided a nice, yummy lunch. One of them was actually a breakfast and learn because they had a lot of nurses on their team that worked early. But it really allowed the team to learn about PFAC. At each one of those, we had an advisor actually come and tell their story as to why they joined the PFAC. And then it allowed open discussion at the end for them to kind of learn more about how they can get involved. So recently that's evolved into where at the end of our quarterly series of our meetings, the last meeting is in person and we invite our vice president, our senior directors, all those leaders to come and give a high level update to the advisors as to how they implemented their work throughout the organization. And then at the end, I always like to give an update as to what's to come. So I gave training on how we are really focused on quality and safety this coming year and moving forward, but really focusing on those two main areas because those really impact patient outcomes and the patient experience. And they do so much work within those two domains and really tapping into the PFAC to be a part of that. So that's just a small snippet of how I've been training. And I do ongoing training. I have one-on-one training sessions with leaders all the time. And we have a great relationship and now they do word to word, mouth to mouth, word to word conversation with others. And, they get in contact with me and they're like, how can I get involved? And so our 15, it may grow soon, but, as our department continues to grow, we may need some more help, but it's all good.
Good. All right. One more research that I just wanted to show. How often do you work privately with members regarding their behavior? And, this was surprising, except when I realized that 3 PFACs closed because of disruptive behavior. I mean, I guess this makes sense. But let's turn to Amber. Do you want to talk about the ways that you coach members for their behavior?
Yeah, and I like the word coach, but I also like to use the word just through kindness. Um, a lot of times, I like to, and sometimes they say kill them with kindness, or that kindness is the way to go. So starting out kind of from a place of curiosity, asking kind of what's going on, or what was the reason for the way they responded in this particular meeting, or maybe to another advisor or myself. But then also just kind of setting clear expectations moving forward that, the best practice is that we're here to support one another in the organization and really get their insight into, how they see the best way of them doing that and making sure that still aligns with what our goals, policies, and, overall what the PFAC stands for. But initially it starts with that kindness component and then it leads to where I kind of maybe address privately. And I want to do mention this is all done privately. It's not done in front of anybody. It's a phone call or a face-to-face. Sometimes I've had coffee with a coordinator and I'll just sit with an advisor. That's the term I use. I sit with an advisor and I just chat. But really starting with their strengths, right? Letting them know you're a great person. We love having you on the PFAC. We enjoy the work that you're doing. And then just use specific examples as to, what was a concern of mine that drew me to have this conversation with them, and then just discuss expectations moving forward. I want them to stay on the PFAC. I want them to be engaged. Is there any other ways I can help make sure they're successful? Do I need to re-engage other people to make sure they feel included on the PFAC? Making sure I'm not missing anything as to why maybe that disruptive behavior might have come about. But I will say, I'm going to say this confidently, that at TGH, we don't really have disruptive behavior. And so those conversations are very few and limited. And so I am grateful for that, but that is definitely my approach.
Yeah, and I think probably you don't, because you've set the groundwork on recruiting and training and all the other things that you do, and that sort of prevents anything like this. So where did you learn to embrace these conversations about behavior and the few and far between ones that you have, whereas some people are actually closing their PFAC?
That's a great question. So I think a little bit of my skill sets have kind of rubbed into this role. I do serve in another capacity within the Air Force Reserves. So I oversee, a large unit and members there. And so I'm kind of learning that discipline approach, and also understanding I've been treated a certain way in the past that I don't want to portray for others. So understanding these are volunteers, these are patients, these are people who have a lot going on within their lives, and coming from a sensitive, more compassionate approach is the best, in my opinion, than tearing a person down or making them feel like, their voice isn't valuable. So I kind of learned those tricks through some of my work through the Air Force, and then also just through my personal experience. And they always say treat a person how you want to be treated. And essentially that's kind of my motto.
Um, and Quinlan, I think you had an example of how you have coached a PFAC member.
Yeah, we had and I would actually say coach the PFAC as well. Uh we have an individual at Michigan Medicine that is on the spectrum. She's on the higher end, so she's real high functioning, excuse me. Um and sometimes when some of the information get overwhelmed, they may get a little bit destructive or may stem a little bit. So us and the chair sat down with that individual to find out what we can do to better change the atmosphere, and maybe turning down the lights, giving someone something to help them out, like some puzzles or some fidget spinners or Play-Doh, and we actually do this with a couple of our PFACs, especially with our children PFACs and whatnot, just so they can keep their focus, and then educate our PFAC members of this is may what we may see. We already asked the individual if they feel like they may STEM, just to take a step out of the classroom, and then come back in when they are feeling up to it, or up to that standard. Also, that everyone that comes into the meeting already have that expectation that this is something that may happen. So we want to handle that going forth as well. And making everything Zoom is was a little bit better too. So we don't have that expectation that everyone have to be on camera, just in case someone wants to STEM, or have something that they may need to just step away the camera for, then they have that opportunity to do so. And we found that to be a lot better in regards to keeping everyone involved, and not actually having that distractions, as you will, too.
Mhm. So I'm just realizing that there was a discrepancy in the invitation, which I think said 45 minutes, and the actual webinar here, which is set for 60 minutes. And I didn't want to end here because we haven't gotten to any questions, so I apologize. We found last time on the recruitment webinar that we really needed more time than 45 minutes, so these webinars will be 60 minutes. So Lori Albers is helping us today, and she's from Wisconsin Children's, and she was one of the panelists from the recruitment webinar. And thank you so much, Lori, for that. The feedback that I'm getting is incredible. And you can find that on YouTube, and the channel is Healthcare PX for patient experience. And all of the webinars are up there. So, Lori, do we have any questions that you want to ask the panelists that have appeared in the Q&A, or perhaps the chat?
Sure. So there are a lot of questions in here. So Katie has been kind enough when she hasn't been speaking to answer some of them in the chat. So thanks, Katie, for helping me out. I've answered those that I've known, but there are a number of other questions in here. So one that I would really like to start with, which we touched on very briefly, is like, how do your teams determine what should be on the agenda? Like what criteria do you use to determine what is most impactful or what those relevant topics should be that should be brought forth to families?
Okay, so let me answer that first based on research, and that is the topics are generally from departments. And in one hospital, there are so many departments that want to get the feedback from the patient advisor council that they have a form online that people fill out with probably a dozen questions on why they want to come in front of the PFAC and ask certain questions. And let me open it up to the panel now. Anybody want to jump in here?
I can. So when I first started into this role, we did a dot exercise, and what that means is we opened the floor to the advisors to bring up common themes or common topics that they want to know about within the health system, and then we wrote them down on large pieces of paper around the room, and we allowed them to take dots and stick which ones they want to hear more about that particular year. But I was fortunate where I had to transcribe all of that, and I kept a running list. And so over the last year or so, I picked from that list key topics that were high on the totem pole that the advisors wanted to know about and learn about. And I reached out to leaders within those departments and asked them to come speak about those areas. And so we asked the advisors simply. That's the kind of the gist of that. We asked them, what do you want to know? What do you want to hear? And then also kind of understanding the healthcare culture. There's a lot of changes, especially in our organization around technology. So keeping them up to date, like with AI and things like that, understanding how their information is still safe, because they're still patients of our health system. So if they're able to still come in and understand the inner workings of the health system or tell their family members or whoever, they're able to be educated on that. So just understanding too where the culture is within health and educating that way too.
So is that more informational than Amber, as opposed to a department coming and asking questions?
It becomes both. So I
Okay.
definitely tell the departments to please have questions for the PFAC or to ask for feedback. Yes.
Great. Right. Okay, anybody else want to jump in there, or
I
should we
would-
move on? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just go really quickly. So we do something similar to Amber where we are asking, so we do a formal annual assessment survey that we have all of our members fill out. It just helps us take the temperature. What did we do well? What can we get better at? What are they interested in for the next year? It helps us set our strategies and priorities, and also to identify specific agenda topics, because they do absolutely, to Amber's point, they really do bubble up into themes that you can follow. So we haven't found that our heads are popping off trying to find like agenda topics. But we have been also around for a while. And so we do have people coming to us looking for time. And the criteria that we focus on for that is it can be a little bit informational, but it must be mostly a feedback opportunity. And that's just based on years of family advisors saying, I come to the meeting to give feedback. I'm happy to welcome information via email about updates other ways, but I want to be able to lend my voice while we're in the meeting. So we focus on feedback opportunities.
And one of the things that I found in the research with regard to the feedback is that you have to close the loop with your PFAC members. You can't just have them keep giving their brainiac information to the departments and not have the departments come back and said, here's what we heard and here's what we did, and thank you for your impact. You know, PFAC members want to know that. And I've heard stories of members leaving because they said, I'm not making an impact and I don't know what happens to what I say. So that is very important. Okay, Lori, back to you with another question.
Sure. So we have a number of questions in here regarding structure of the PFAC. Like who are the members and how is it led? And I know it's different in every system, so.
Who are the members? So they're patients and families. What do you have any other thoughts about what that question means?
There's I'm combining a couple questions together, but like, who are the members? What is the representation of staff? What does that look like from a staff perspective? And then obviously you have families, but do they have specific roles on your PFAC?
Okay, so I will start with the research then, and I'm just looking on my other monitors here for the research. And the split should be 50-50 between the liaisons with the hospital and the PFAC volunteers who are patients and families. Generally, it tends to be more. It's like a 13 members on average is what I found of the volunteers, the PFAC members, and then 7 people that's the average that I found. I heard one the other day that there were 21 people who were from the hospital and 4 patients. And the patient was telling me, we don't want to speak up. We feel overwhelmed in the meetings. This is more like a staff meeting. They're not getting the voice of the patient. So go ahead. Who wants to jump in on the panel and take this?
I say I can jump in. I agree with that. It has to be at least 50% going more towards the patient side. And when it comes to the staff, at Michigan Medicine, we had a saying that it has to be a representative from each area. So if it's an ambulatory care, it has to be a medical director, a doctor, a nurse, a clerical staff, so we can get a lot of different opinions going on some of those as well. And then as far as some of the structures, it's in every PFAC that I am involved with, there has to be a co-lead that is a staff member, and then a co-lead that is a patient as well.
Yeah, we do the same thing. And I would say we're maybe on the other end of things where I don't even think 50-50 would work. But so we happen to have 5 staff members and 25 advisors on our hospital-wide group. But what we do is if there's an agenda topic that's specific to an area, we'll invite a senior leader for that, alongside the presenters for that area. So there's visibility and presence, but you're also respecting that balance and comfort of your advisors, while also, because our meetings are evening meetings, respecting the evening time of people who may be, trying to balance work with life.
Yeah, and then for us too, we have various advisory councils, but our main structure is we always have a nurse leader. The VP, it could be either operational or clinical, meaning they oversee the whole institute. We go by service line, so the whole department, I should say. And then we like to have, like you mentioned, Quinlan, like various people who represent the different areas. So I'll use neuro, for example. They have a craniotomy, they have a stroke, and they have an epilepsy. So we want the leaders from each of those areas to come to talk to those questions specifically that the advisors may have. But we have a decent split too, probably about 50-50. Some advisory councils have more advisors than leaders. It just depends on the actual structure of that particular PFAC.
Good. Lori, back to you.
Is there a reporting structure of impact and engagement that's provided to the PFAC?
And that would be a reporting structure up. Yeah, so let's find out. Who do you report to? And what type of information do you share with leaders based on what you do? Anyone want to start that?
I think this is going to be different for all of us. Like Lori and I work together outside of this type of forum, and we both report up to different places. But our hospital-wide and our family partnerships program reports up dually to patient nursing and patient care operations and our safety and quality organization. So we have senior leaders who are standing members of that whole program and our hospital-wide FAC. But ultimately, we do report up, like we share what we do with our CEO, with our board. We're very fortunate that people are open and willing to to hear. It's an annual report. We're not in front of them constantly, but we feel as if we report ultimately to the CEO, just like the rest of the hospital, because we're here to support and align with the strategic goals of our organization.
And with regard to sharing reports, here's a quick research, 2 questions here. How do you promote the accomplishments? And you can see the majority here, 51%, have a report. But how often do you report the accomplishments? And it's annually. 2/3 of people are reporting annually. And I'm recommending that it be monthly, that what's happening should go in some kind of an internal newsletter, because what I found in the research is that the more visibility that you have, the more content that you get from departments. So this is very important. And I see that we only have 5 minutes left. Lori, thank you so much for curating the Q&A and helping with this webinar. So let me stop sharing here. Thank you, Amber Washington from Tampa General Hospital, Katie Litterer from Boston Children's Hospital, which started in 1982, according to my research, and Quinlan Davis from the University of Maryland Capital Regional Health. We really appreciate it. So let me show you a couple more slides here, and then we're going to wrap this up, and this is what's coming next. Okay, so our next webinar is Get a Black Belt in PFACs. In the series, it's 3 proven ways to measure the impact of PFACs. On Friday, January 9th, I just put in the chat the link to sign up for this. This will be a 60-minute meeting. And I'm going to talk about the fact that there are so few PFACs that are doing any measuring. I read 143 articles from around the world on PFACs, and only a fraction, just a handful of them, 5 or 6, mentioned anything about measurement. And this is so important that we have to measure, because we have to prove our value. And now with the financial strain that many hospitals are under, I was just at a webinar and they said this is the #1 thing that's happening, is the financial strain. When hospitals look around at what they're going to cut, they may look at patient experience and PFACs and say, this is soft and we need to cut this. So I'm going to try to help everyone to measure so that you can prove your value. And then the next thing is, along with this, what I'm doing is starting this Black Belt PFAC Metrics Challenge of 2026. And this is recognizing councils that have demonstrated measurable outcomes. The deadline is January 26th. And I will be sending that out to everybody and dropping that in the chat in just a moment. And if you're sitting in this webinar with others, I may not have your email address, so make sure that you send me your email address so that you get all this information. Here is my email address. You can watch the recorded webinars on the YouTube channel, and this will be up there, as well as how to tell a story, a few minutes, actually a minute on how to tell a very succinct story. And if I can help you in any way, please contact me. I want to wish everybody happy holidays. And thank you again to Amber Washington, Katie Litterer, and Quinlan Davis, as well as Lori Albers, who helped me on this. Making this another webinar in our series, our Black Belt, to Get a Black Belt in PFAC series, to help you either start or strengthen the PFACs that you have. Thank you.